She was in labor, screaming, bleeding, praying, and he handed her divorce papers. He said no one would ever love her again. But as she gave birth to twin girls, alone in that sterile hospital room, something unexplainable happened. A vow rose from her pain. They will never feel unloved like I did. What she didn't know was that 5 years later, a billionaire would walk into her life and choose her daughters like they were his own. But what happened next? No one could have imagined. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and comment below. Where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing like a nervous whisper in the cold delivery room at New York General Hospital. It was 3:47 a.m. The air carried the faint smell of antiseptic and something metallic, sharp, sterile, and unforgiving. Hannah Collins lay on the hospital bed, sweat dripping from her forehead. Her fingers gripping the steel rails so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her lips were cracked, her breath shallow. Pain surged through her abdomen in relentless waves, every contraction tearing through her like a storm battering a fragile coastline. 18 hours. That's how long she'd been in labor. 18 hours of blood, pain, and silence. And he never came. She stared at that door, breath held, eyes wide every few minutes, convinced he would appear. That Mark would burst through, offering some ridiculous excuse. He'd lost his phone or taken the wrong subway. That maybe, just maybe, the man she had loved for 6 years, the father of her twin girls, would return to her now when she needed him more than ever. But the door remained shut, and the silence grew thicker. Every time a nurse entered, her heart would leap, only to plummet back down again. Their faces blurred through her tears, their voices too soft to pierce the crushing reality she was trapped in. She was alone. Alone in the moment that should have defined them both. Alone while 2 lives fought to be born from her body, and the man who had helped create them had vanished like smoke. Hannah's lips trembled. Her lower back throbbed. Her whole body shook with exhaustion and heartbreak. She couldn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried hours ago. And then, the door opened. Her heart skipped, but instead of relief, a foul smell hit the air. Alcohol. Mark stumbled in, disheveled and unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, his collar stained, eyes glassy and indifferent. His presence didn't bring comfort. It brought dread. Well, well, he slurred, smirking. Quite the scene. Hannah blinked. Mark, where were you? He shrugged, reached into his coat, and tossed a manila envelope onto the table beside her IV. Out. Thinking. Drinking. Doesn't matter. Sign those when you're done playing mommy. Her gaze dropped to the envelope. The bold letters read, Divorce Agreement. Her mouth went dry. You're leaving now, he scoffed. Hannah, look at yourself. You think I'm sticking around for this mess? You're a disaster. You're swollen, sweating, screaming like an animal. This isn't what I signed up for. A nurse stepped forward, visibly appalled. Sir, you need to leave if you're going to upset the patient. I'm her husband, he barked, then turned back to Hannah. At least for the next 10 minutes. Hannah's voice cracked. You don't want to see them, your daughters. Mark snorted. They're probably just as wrecked as you. Do whatever you want with them, I'm done. She stared at him, not with hatred, not even shock, but with an empty, growing silence. A silence that said something inside her had snapped, and not from the pain but from the clarity. Mark walked out without looking back. The door closed, and this time, Hannah didn't wait for it to reopen. The nurse returned to her side, holding her hand. He's not worth your tears, sweetheart. But Hannah wasn't crying anymore. Something else had taken over. Something sharp, quiet. A vow that bloomed in her chest like fire wrapped in velvet. She inhaled slowly, her jaw clenched. Then I'll do it alone. The nurse nodded. You're not alone, we're right here. Another contraction hit, longer and deeper this time. Her body arched, the monitors beeped louder. A doctor entered. The room shifted into motion. Gloves were pulled on, tools arranged. Encouragement murmured. And then, a scream. Hers, but not of fear, of resistance, of resolve. Because even in that agony, Hannah was rewriting her story. She wasn't the woman left behind anymore. She was a mother finding her own strength. Push, push again, push until the world changes. And then, crying. Not hers. Two voices. Two perfect cries. Tears finally escaped her eyes, but they weren't from grief. They were from awe. From the miracle of holding Grace in one arm and Emma in the other. Two tiny beings with dark hair and lungs full of protest, hearts pounding just inches from hers. Their skin against hers, warm and damp. Their fingers curled around hers, helpless but full of trust. "They're perfect," the nurse whispered, her voice cracking. Hannah kissed both their heads. "You will never feel what I felt tonight. I promise you." Her voice trembled, but her soul didn't. Not anymore. Not after this. The past had shattered her, but these girls had sewn her back together. And as she closed her eyes, holding them tight against her chest, the room no longer felt empty. But outside, down the hall, beyond the reach of light, a question still lingered in the air like a thread pulled loose from fate. What if this night, this pain, was the beginning of something far greater than the life she lost? The sun had just begun to rise, casting a faint golden hue over the city skyline as Hannah lay in the hospital bed, cradling both of her daughters in her arms. The delivery room had quieted now, the chaos giving way to a serene stillness that felt sacred. All she could hear was the soft rhythm of her baby's breathing, one nestled against her chest, the other curled in the crook of her arm. Grace and Emma. Their names had come to her like whispers from heaven. Grace, for the strength she'd felt when she had none. Emma, for the hope she never stopped holding on to, even in the darkest hour. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, soaking into the soft hospital blanket wrapped around them. But these weren't the same tears she'd cried through labor. These were tears of awe, of exhaustion, of rebirth. Her body ached in every muscle, her throat was raw from hours of screaming, and yet she had never felt more alive. There, in that quiet room with two fragile lives tethered to her heartbeat, Hannah Collins was reborn. Not as a wife, not as the woman who had been abandoned, but as a mother. And something inside her shifted permanently. She kissed the crown of each tiny head. Their skin was impossibly soft. Their scent, something between warm milk and innocence, filled her senses with a kind of peace that nothing in the world could imitate. It was as if the pain she had just endured had carved a sacred space in her soul where only love could exist now. "I'm sorry you came into the world like this," she whispered, voice cracking. "You deserved more. You deserved better." She closed her eyes, breathing them in. "But I swear to you," she continued, tears falling freely now, "you will never feel what I felt tonight. Not from me, not ever." That was the moment the promise was born. Not a dramatic vow shouted into the wind, not something carved in stone, but a quiet, invincible thread that stitched itself into her heart, a silent commitment that would guide every breath, every choice, every sacrifice. She would raise them with everything she had, even if it meant giving up every dream she once held for herself, even if she had to scrape pennies just to buy milk, even if she went to bed hungry so they never would. They would never feel unwanted. They would never be left wondering if they were enough. Because they were more than enough, they were everything. Later that morning, a nurse came in with 2 birth certificates and a pen. "Do you want to include the father's name?" she asked gently, not unkindly. Hannah didn't hesitate. "No." She filled out the paperwork with steady hands, her heart oddly calm. There was no bitterness in her decision, just clarity. Mark had chosen to walk away, but these girls were never his to begin with. Not in the way that mattered. They were hers, entirely. And from that day forward, she would not look back. When the nurse left, Hannah watched the light filter through the blinds, casting stripes across the pale blue walls. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like a threat. It felt like a blank canvas, and she had paint in her hands. Her mother had once told her that broken women make the fiercest mothers, that pain, when transformed by love, could become the strongest foundation. At the time, Hannah hadn't understood. But now she did. Every insult Mark had thrown at her, too needy, too soft, too emotional, was exactly what made her strong. She would teach her daughters that softness wasn't weakness, That dignity was louder than revenge. That love wasn't something you begged for. It was something you built piece by piece in the quiet moments, and she would start building it now. Over the next 2 days, Hannah barely slept. She fed them, changed them, sang lullabies to soothe their cries. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but her spirit had found a kind of fuel that no one could take away. Nurses came and went, offering help, asking about family, visitors, support. But there were no flowers, no balloons, no proud father pacing the halls, just Hannah and 2 girls wrapped in pink. Still, she didn't feel empty. She felt full. As she packed their hospital bag on the 3rd day, Hannah caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were rimmed with dark circles. Her hair hung limply over her shoulders. She looked tired, fragile, but beneath all that, she saw something else. A spark, a fire, and a question. What if this wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a new one? She looked down at Grace and Emma, sleeping peacefully in their car seats, and something deep inside her stirred. Not fear, but readiness. Ready to fight, to protect, to rise. She whispered once more so softly that only the air could hear, "I don't know how I'll do it, but I will. For you." And with that, she pushed the hospital door open with her hip and stepped into the hallway, not as the woman who had been abandoned, but as the woman who had survived it. And far down the corridor, a nurse glanced up from her station, watching the young mother with twins walk alone toward the exit. No partner, no support, but with a kind of grace in her posture that made her pause. Because something about the way Hannah held those girls, the way she carried herself, said one thing very clearly. She may have been left behind, but she would never be broken. 5 years later, the city of Philadelphia was waking up under a blanket of snow, its streets lined with grey slush and car horns echoing in the distance. Inside a narrow, drafty apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Kensington, Hannah Collins stood in the small kitchen, her hands red from the cold water of a sink that hadn't seen hot water in weeks. She was rinsing 2 plastic lunchboxes, her movements swift, practiced, almost mechanical. Grace and Emma sat at the wobbly kitchen table behind her, bundled in oversized coats and hand-me-down scarves. Their breath clouded in the icy air as they munched on toast with peanut butter, giggling over a drawing one of them had made of a supermom wearing a cape and holding 2 smiling girls. They didn't know that their mother hadn't slept more than 3 hours in days. They didn't know she had skipped dinner the night before to make sure there was enough milk for their breakfast, and they certainly didn't know that Hannah had walked 5 blocks in freezing wind at 3 a.m. to clean offices downtown before returning to wake them up for school. But that was the point. That was the promise. They weren't supposed to know. Her daughters would grow up believing they were safe, loved and chosen, no matter how much it cost her. After dropping them off at school, Hannah took the subway to her second job, freelance interior design work she picked up from online ads and referrals. She had talent, real talent, but no connections, no resources, no time to build a name. Still, she carried a cheap leather binder full of color palettes, sketches and floor plans with the same pride a lawyer might hold a case file. Every client she helped, whether redesigning a nursery or refreshing a cramped studio apartment, felt like a small revolution. She moved through the days like a silent force. She rarely spoke of Mark, and when she did, it was only to answer her daughter's cautious questions. "He made a different choice," she would say gently. "But we're okay. We're better than okay." At night, once Grace and Emma were asleep in their shared bed beneath mismatched blankets, Hannah would light the smallest lamp in the apartment and work. She edited digital designs, responded to emails, calculated costs, and sometimes just stared out the window at the city lights, tired to her bones, but still holding on. There were nights she cried quietly on the bathroom floor, pressing a towel to her mouth so the girls wouldn't hear. Nights when loneliness crept in like a cold draft under the door, whispering that she wasn't enough, that this would never get easier, that love had passed her by. But she never cried in front of them. Not once. And somehow, the next morning, she always managed to stand up again. Her daughters were growing fast, so fast it made her chest ache. Grace had a quiet strength, always observing, always steady. Emma was a burst of sunlight, bold and sensitive, asking questions that made Hannah pause and wonder how a 5-year-old could carry such wisdom in her eyes. One evening, as they sat on the floor with crayons and construction paper, Emma looked up and asked, "Mommy, how come you never get tired?" Hannah smiled, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I do, sweetheart. Sometimes I do." "But you never stop," Grace added, leaning her head on Hannah's shoulder. "You're always here." Hannah kissed the top of her head. "Because you're my reason. You two are my whole world." The girls didn't respond, but they didn't need to. They just leaned into her, trusting her warmth more than any blanket. And in that moment, the exhaustion faded just enough to feel like hope. Still, not everything was soft. There were days the car wouldn't start, and she had to drag both girls on buses across town. Days when a client cancelled and she had to choose between groceries or rent. Days when the ache of what she had lost, her marriage, her dignity, her dreams, roared louder than her resolve. But then came the little victories. A neighbor recommending her to a local cafe that needed a redesign. A single email from a client saying, "Thank you. You made this place feel like home." And the drawings, always the drawings. Grace and Emma made them constantly. Pictures of their small family, of a house with a garden, of a woman with long brown hair and stars above her head. "Who's this?" Hannah asked one night, holding up another crayon masterpiece. Emma beamed. "You, that's you, you're the hero." It took everything in Hannah not to break in that moment, because somewhere along the way, in the quietest corners of her pain, she had become that woman. Not perfect, not invincible, but unbreakable. And that was enough. Most nights, after putting her daughters to sleep, she stood for a moment by their bedroom door, watching them breathe. The radiator hissed softly in the background. Outside, snowflakes danced beneath the streetlight. She would whisper to herself, "You're doing it, Hannah. You're doing it." But as she turned off the hallway light one winter night and walked back toward her tiny living room turned design studio, she paused by the window, watching the city stretch out before her like a maze. She had survived 5 years of solitude, struggle, and sacrifice. But a question began to form in the quiet. Could life offer more than just survival? It was a Wednesday evening in mid-February, the kind of bitter cold night that turned breath into smoke and made the city shimmer beneath the glow of street lamps. Hannah pulled her wool cap lower on her forehead and wrapped her scarf tighter as she rushed down the stone steps of the Riverside Grand Ballroom. The icy wind bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her hands were numb not from the cold, but from the tray she had been holding for the past 4 hours, silver, heavy, and unforgiving. She was working the gala as a server, last-minute call from the catering company she occasionally freelanced for. The venue was a towering piece of architectural glamour on the edge of the riverfront, filled tonight with New York's elite. Politicians, philanthropists, investors, and socialites mingled beneath golden chandeliers, sipping champagne and nibbling hors d'oeuvres prepared by chefs whose names were whispered like spells. And there was Hannah, hair pulled into a low bun, uniform a size too large, name tag askew, moving between tables with the invisibility of someone used to not being seen. Her fingers curled tightly around the stem of a wine glass as she made her way through the crowd. The music swelled, something classical and extravagant, but Hannah was focused only on balancing the tray and keeping her head down. Until it happened. A misstep, a sudden shift in the crowd, a man brushing past too quickly. The tray tilted, a glass of red wine toppled, and landed directly on the chest of a tall man in a black tuxedo. Hannah gasped, "Oh my God, sir, I'm so sorry." The tray clattered to the floor. The room didn't go silent, but for a moment it felt like it had. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she reached for a cloth from her apron, trying to blot the deep red stain now spreading across the man's starched white shirt. He looked down, then up, his eyes locking with hers. She froze. Not because he looked angry, but because he didn't. He looked amused. And then he laughed. Not the cruel, condescending kind of laugh she expected. Not the impatient, public humiliation sort of laugh that people in his world often unleashed on people in hers. No, this was something else. A low, warm chuckle that came from somewhere deep in his chest. "Don't worry," he said, his voice calm, smooth as velvet. It's just a shirt. Hannah blinked. I can fix it. I mean, I'll pay for the cleaning. Please don't, he interrupted gently. You already look like tonight's been hard enough. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. Her feet were aching, her fingers were frozen, and her pride had just shattered all over the ballroom floor. A woman in a sleek red dress approached him, eyes scanning the stain. Nathan, darling, should we have someone take care of that? He turned to her with a polite smile. Thanks, Laura, but I'm fine. Then he turned back to Hannah. Are you okay? She nodded too quickly. Yes, just embarrassed. Nathan Carter. The name echoed in her head as she stared at him. It was impossible not to recognize him. The youngest tech billionaire in the country, founder of a humanitarian startup that had just landed on the cover of Forbes, known for his reserved nature, generous donations, and an expression that rarely gave anything away. And now he was standing here, smiling at her like she wasn't just the girl who spilled wine on him, but someone worth seeing. You have steady hands, he remarked, bending to pick up her tray before she could. But that was a pretty sharp crowd move back there. Impressive recovery. I think I failed spectacularly, she muttered. He grinned. I don't think so. She took the tray from him, careful not to meet his eyes too long. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Nathan, he corrected. Mr. Carter makes me sound like I'm twice your age. Hannah blinked. You probably are. He laughed again, then tilted his head slightly. Do you work for the ballroom? No, catering company, she replied. Just temp work. Designer? He asked suddenly, glancing at the sketches sticking out of her notebook near the water station. Her heart stuttered. What? Those look like layout sketches, he said, pointing. Color swatches, proportions. You either work in design or you're a very organized doodler, she swallowed. I do some freelance work, nothing big. I like that, he said. Nothing big yet. Hannah didn't know what to say to that. Compliments made her uneasy, especially from men like him. Men who could afford words the way others bought diamonds. Listen, he added, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a business card. If you ever want a referral or just someone to look at your work, send me a sample. I'm rebuilding the workspace in one of our outreach offices. She hesitated, then took the card. His fingers brushed hers, barely, but it left a strange warmth buzzing along her wrist. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then smiled, a smile that didn't belong to a billionaire at a ballroom gala, but to a man who noticed the quiet things, who saw past uniforms and nervous apologies. As he disappeared into the crowd, Hannah stood still for a beat too long. When she finally turned back to the catering station, the other servers were watching her, wide-eyed. Did you just flirt with Nathan Carter? One whispered. Hannah exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. I think I spilled wine on him. But deep down something had shifted. Not just in the way he'd looked at her, but in the way she had looked at herself, in his presence. And as she tucked the card carefully into her apron pocket, a question began to bloom quietly in her chest. Could something that began with a mistake actually be the start of something extraordinary? The following day, Hannah stood outside Henderson's cafe, her fingers wrapped tightly around a paper cup of steaming coffee, though she hadn't taken a single sip. The morning was overcast, and the cold air bit at her cheeks, but inside, her chest was far warmer than she could explain. She kept glancing at the business card tucked into her coat pocket. Nathan Carter, founder and CEO. Sleek, white, impossibly clean. He had told her to send a sample. Instead, he'd sent a message, one she couldn't stop replaying in her mind. Nothing big, yet. Was it a line, a moment of politeness, or had he seen something more than just a clumsy waitress in a borrowed uniform? She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The cafe was warm and filled with the soft aroma of roasted espresso, vanilla syrup, and fresh pastries. It was one of those places where every corner felt curated, books on the windowsill, brass light fixtures, jazz humming in the background. And there he was. Nathan sat at a corner table, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, dark eyes focused on the screen of his phone. When he looked up, he smiled, not the kind of smile people give out of obligation, but one that said he was genuinely happy to see her. "I almost thought you wouldn't come," he said, standing as she approached. "I almost didn't," she admitted, pulling off her gloves. "Why?" "Because this feels completely out of place for me." Nathan gestured to the seat across from him. "Then let's make it less strange. Pretend I'm just a guy who drinks too much coffee and got wine spilled on him." She laughed, unexpectedly freely. The conversation started with small talk, weather, the gala, how the wine stain had thankfully come out with club soda and some sort of billionaire-grade detergent. But slowly, the layers began to peel away. Nathan asked about her design work, genuinely curious. She showed him some photos on her phone, before and after shots of small spaces she had transformed on impossibly small budgets. A tiny bedroom turned into a whimsical reading nook for twin girls. A worn-down studio converted into a vibrant work-from-home haven. "This one," he said, pointing to a pastel-toned living room. "It feels like someone could breathe in there." Hannah looked down. That was for a single mom with 3 boys. She cried when she saw it finished. "You have a gift," Nathan said softly. "You see what a space needs. But more than that, you see what people need from it." She felt her throat tighten. No one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. "What about you?" she asked, changing the subject. "How did a tech guy end up in philanthropy?" His smile faded slightly, just enough to change the temperature of the conversation. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands together. "I lost both of my parents when I was 16, he said. "Car accident, no warning. One night they were home, the next morning they weren't." Her heart clenched. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "I was angry for a long time. Then I started building things. Anything. Code, mostly. Systems that solved problems. At first it was about distraction, but then it became about something else, control. Creating order in a world that felt completely out of mine." She listened intently, drawn in by the rawness of his voice, the honesty in his eyes. "Helping people wasn't part of the plan," he continued, "but I realized the more I gave away, the more pieces of me I got back." Hannah stared at her coffee, no longer untouched. "I wish I had figured that out at 16. He looked at her gently. "What happened?" She hesitated. Then slowly she told him. About the hospital room, the labor, the divorce papers, the words Mark had said to her in that moment of utter vulnerability, and about the twins, how they had become her anchor, her reason, her rebirth. Nathan didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions or cliches. He just listened, with his entire body, as if her story deserved space and reverence. When she finished, there was a silence between them, but not an awkward one. It felt sacred, like the kind of pause that only exists between two people who have seen something true in each other. "I can't believe you did all that alone," he finally said. "I wasn't really alone," she replied, eyes distant. "I had them, Grace and Emma. They saved me, even though they don't know it." Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I never had siblings, never married, no kids. But I've always believed the people we fight for shape the best version of us. I just wish that version didn't come with so many cracks," she murmured. He looked at her for a long moment. "Sometimes the cracks are where the light gets in." Hannah's breath caught in her throat, and then, softly, almost reluctantly, he smiled. "Would it be too forward if I asked to meet them, Grace and Emma?" She blinked. "You want to meet my daughters? Not today, not as a favor, just sometime. If you think they'd like me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "They'd love you." The words left her lips before she could think, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt terrifying and right, like opening a window that had been shut for far too long. Nathan reached for his wallet and left cash on the table. As they stood to leave, he paused beside her, holding her gaze. "I don't know where this is going," he said honestly, "but I want to see you again." She nodded, pulse racing. As they stepped out into the cold, Hannah felt the wind whip past her cheeks again, but this time it didn't sting. And as she walked away, she realized something had shifted. Not in him, in her. She had told her story, and instead of being pushed away, someone had stayed. But even as her fingers reached into her coat to touch the card in her pocket, a question trembled in her mind. What happens when the heart you've rebuilt brick by brick starts to beat for someone again? The Philadelphia Museum of Natural History was unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. The city was still thawing from the last snowstorm, and many families had chosen warmth over wonder. But not Hannah. For her daughters, the museum was a place of magic, where dinosaurs roared silently in glass rooms and stars blinked forever above planetarium domes. It was a place where reality bent just enough for dreams to breathe. Grace and Emma walked hand in hand, their boots squeaking against the polished marble floor. Hannah followed close behind, her heart both full and restless. She was nervous. Nathan had asked, gently, respectfully, to meet the girls. And after 2 weeks of texts, long conversations over coffee, and one walk through Rittenhouse Square that ended with a pause-too-long hug, she said yes. He wasn't late. In fact, he was already waiting by the museum's main entrance when they arrived, dressed in jeans and a navy sweater that somehow made him look both effortless and quietly remarkable. Emma spotted him first. "Is that him?" she whispered, her voice filled with a blend of curiosity and excitement. Hannah nodded. "That's Nathan." Emma tilted her head. "He doesn't look scary." "He's not," Hannah said, though her voice came out softer than intended. Nathan approached, offering a smile that reached his eyes. "Hi, girls. I've been hearing a lot about you." Grace narrowed her eyes with suspicion, her usual instinct when faced with someone new. Emma, on the other hand, stepped forward and extended a mitten-covered hand. "I'm Emma. I'm 6. I like space and cereal and purple socks." Nathan shook her hand solemnly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emma. I like space, too." "And cereal?" she asked, lips twitching into a grin. "Especially the sugary kind I'm not supposed to eat." Emma turned back to Grace. "He's funny." Grace didn't reply, but she nodded slowly, and that was all the permission Emma needed. The tour began in the dinosaur hall. Nathan listened attentively as the girls explained each exhibit with the authority of junior paleontologists. When Emma announced, "That's a stegosaurus. He has plates, not spikes," Nathan feigned shock and asked for clarification, letting her beam as she taught him everything she knew. Grace stayed close to her mother at first, arms crossed, eyes watchful. But Nathan didn't rush her. He didn't force connection. Instead, he noticed the small things, like the way she lingered a little longer at the fossil lab, or how she silently mouthed facts under her breath when she thought no one was listening. He walked beside her quietly. And then, without a word, he knelt beside a glass case and asked, "Grace, if you were designing a museum, what would be the first thing you'd put in it?" She hesitated. And then, quietly, she replied, "A telescope, but a real one. Not behind glass." He smiled. "I'd come to your museum." That was all it took. From that moment on, something shifted. They moved as a group now, talking, laughing, taking silly pictures by the animatronic T-Rex. Nathan even bought them astronaut ice cream from the gift shop, which Emma declared tastes like sweet cardboard. Hannah watched from a few steps behind, heart aching with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Later, in the planetarium, they sat in silence as stars spun across the ceiling dome. The lights dimmed, the narrator's voice echoed gently through the space. And in the quiet dark, Emma leaned against Nathan's arm. He didn't flinch. He didn't freeze. He simply placed his hand gently over hers. Hannah blinked fast, her throat tight. It wasn't the grand gesture that undid her. It was the quiet, the stillness of it. The way the moment asked for nothing, demanded nothing, but gave everything. After the show, they bundled back into their coats. Nathan helped zip up Grace's jacket when her glove got stuck. He crouched to tie Emma's boot when the lace came loose. It was effortless, as if he'd always known how to fit into these small but sacred rhythms. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting everything in soft gold. The air was crisp, the sidewalk wet from melted snow. As they walked back toward the subway, Emma looked up at Nathan and asked, "Can we call you Mr. Nathan?" He chuckled. "I'd be honored. And maybe, someday..." She paused. "Can you come to our school's spring fair? There'll be cotton candy." Nathan grinned. I wouldn't miss it. Hannah's heart tightened. They reached the entrance to the station, and Hannah turned to him, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to this, men showing up, following through, giving more than they took. Thank you, she said quietly, for today. He glanced at the girls who were busy comparing pocket-sized toy dinosaurs, then back at her. It was the best Saturday I've had in years. His words weren't dramatic, just true. She nodded, suddenly unsure of her voice. They lingered there, two adults standing on the edge of something neither could name yet. The traffic roared behind them. The girls giggled nearby, and still, neither moved. Finally, Nathan said, I'd like to see you again. Them too. I'd like that, Hannah replied. As she watched him walk away, she felt Grace slip her hand into hers. He's nice, Grace whispered. Hannah glanced down, surprised. Grace looked up. He sees us. And in that single sentence, something inside Hannah splintered in the most beautiful way, because she knew exactly what her daughter meant. Nathan hadn't come to impress. He had come to see. And now, as the train thundered into the station, Hannah's thoughts blurred into something she hadn't dared consider in years. What if this wasn't just a good day? What if this was the beginning of home? The salon was nestled on Michigan Avenue, tucked between designer storefronts and cafes with velvet ropes and 2-hour waits. From the outside, it looked like another world, a world Hannah had never belonged to. Glass panels reflected the golden afternoon light, and inside, women with glossy hair and tailored coats sipped citrus-infused water, while stylists glided between stations like artists in motion. Hannah stood on the sidewalk, hesitating. She wore her usual jeans, worn at the knees, and a faded sweater with sleeves stretched out at the cuffs. Her boots were scuffed. Her fingers tugged nervously at the strap of her bag. Beside her, Nathan stood calmly, hands in the pockets of his long coat. So you brought me here? She asked, blinking at the sleek glass door. He nodded. Full treatment. Her brows drew together. Nathan, this place isn't for people like me. He turned to her, voice gentle. This place is for people who deserve to feel like themselves again. She looked away, embarrassed. You think changing my hair is going to change who I am? No, he said, smiling. But maybe it'll help you remember who you've always been. Before she could respond, the door opened and a well-dressed receptionist stepped out. Mr. Carter, right on time. Hannah flinched. They know you here. He shrugged. I sponsor the Women's Initiative program. They donate styling hours to survivors and single mothers entering the workforce. It's kind of our secret spot. She didn't move. Nathan leaned closer, his voice lower now. There's no pressure, Hannah. If you don't want this, we can leave. Right now. But if there's even a tiny part of you that's curious, I'll be waiting. Then, with that quiet confidence that somehow never felt condescending, he stepped aside and let her choose. She took a breath and walked inside. The next few hours were surreal. They led her to a private lounge with soft lighting and quiet music. Her worn coat was gently taken and hung. A stylist named Marielle introduced herself with a warm smile and gentle touch. We're not changing you, she said. We're just inviting you back. Hannah sat in front of a mirror she normally would have avoided, but today she looked, really looked. Her eyes were tired, her skin pale from long winters. Her hair hung limp around her face, dull and dry. She almost apologized for herself instinctively, but she didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the process begin. They washed her hair slowly, massaging her scalp until her shoulders melted under their hands. They trimmed and shaped, letting go of years' worth of neglect. Marielle applied soft, natural tones to her face, nothing heavy, just enough to bring out the quiet beauty that had long hidden beneath fatigue. Someone brought her tea with honey. Another brought options. A soft dress in emerald green, a cream blouse, a pair of tailored pants, boots that didn't hurt her feet. It wasn't vanity. It was healing. When she finally stood again and turned toward the mirror, she didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She just breathed. Because for the first time in years, the woman staring back at her didn't feel like a ghost. She felt real, strong, seen. Nathan reappeared in the hallway just as she stepped out. For a moment, he said nothing. Just looked at her, really looked, Not with hunger, not with awe, with respect, with recognition, and something deeper, quieter, admiration. "You're glowing," he said simply. She laughed, nervous. "It's the lighting." "No," he replied, taking a slow step forward. "It's you." Hannah looked down at herself. She didn't feel like Cinderella. There was no ball to attend, no glass slipper to lose. She still had bills waiting at home, the twins' homework to check, leftovers to reheat. But in this sliver of time she felt worthy, not because of the dress, but because someone had reminded her she was more than just what she had survived. As they walked toward the exit, Nathan gently offered his arm. She hesitated for a breath, then took it. They ended the evening at a rooftop restaurant he insisted was casual, though the skyline view and linen napkins said otherwise. But he didn't talk about money. He asked about her favorite movies, her childhood, her dreams, ones she had shelved long ago. "I used to want to design women's shelters," she admitted, "places that felt warm, not clinical, with color and books and doors that locked." He tilted his head. "You still can." She smiled, sad and hopeful all at once. "Maybe." They didn't kiss, they didn't even touch, apart from the soft graze of hands when she reached for her water. But something had shifted between them, something deep, sacred. And as he walked her to the subway, silence wrapping around them like a cocoon, she turned to him and said softly, "Thank you, for today." Not for the makeover, for the mirror. He met her eyes. "You did the hard part. You looked." She boarded the train and waved from the window as it pulled away. Back in her apartment, as she quietly tiptoed past her daughter's room, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The makeup was fading, her curls a little looser now, but the spark was still there. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't hear Mark's voice in her head. She didn't hear him call her ruined or used or unlovable. She heard her own voice, and it said, "I'm still here." But even as she turned off the lights and lay in bed, one thought echoed in the dark. If I'm starting to see myself again, what might he be seeing too? Snow had started falling again, soft and slow, dusting the sidewalks of Philadelphia like powdered sugar. The city glowed under street lamps, everything muted by the hush that winter brought. Inside her apartment, Hannah sat at the kitchen table with a calculator in one hand and a crumpled grocery receipt in the other. The numbers weren't adding up. Rent was due in 4 days. Grace needed new shoes. Emma had a school project that required a trip to the craft store, and one of her freelance clients had delayed payment again. She stared at the red ink circling totals on the page, her chest tightening with the familiar weight of doing too much with too little. From the bedroom came the sound of laughter. Grace and Emma were reenacting a scene from their favorite cartoon, voices high, feet thumping against the floor. That laughter was her anchor. It reminded her why she fought, but tonight the exhaustion sank deeper, and with it came the creeping voice of doubt. Nathan had offered to help last week. It hadn't been dramatic, just a quiet moment when he noticed her hesitation pulling out a debit card at the cafe, and he asked gently if everything was okay. She told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. And he'd said simply, "Let me help, please." She had declined immediately, almost instinctively. "I don't need charity." He hadn't flinched. "It's not charity, Hannah. It's care." But the word still stung, because accepting help had always felt like surrender, like proof that she couldn't do it on her own. Now, as she sat at the table, eyes burning, she wondered if that belief was strength or just pride in disguise. Her phone buzzed. "Nathan, I know today's been heavy. I'm around if you need anything, even just quiet." She stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back, "How do you accept help without feeling like you're failing?" His reply came seconds later. "By remembering that love doesn't keep score, it just shows up." Her breath caught. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. 2 days later, she invited him over, not to help, not to fix, but to be with them. The apartment was small, cluttered with coloring books, socks without pairs, and the scent of pasta lingering in the air. But when Nathan walked in, he didn't scan the chipped walls or the worn floorboards. He knelt to greet the girls, who greeted him like a weekly tradition. They ate dinner together at the cramped table, knees bumping, passing plates with quiet laughter. Emma told him about her solar system model. Grace read aloud from her favorite book, stumbling over the bigger words, while Nathan waited patiently, correcting only when she asked. And later, after the girls had fallen asleep with crumbs of cookies on their pajamas, Nathan helped Hannah wash dishes in silence, his sleeves rolled up, her hands soaked, the radio low. It was domestic, simple, and terrifying, because it felt like something she hadn't let herself imagine in years. When they finished, she leaned against the counter, drying her hands. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Let someone in, without giving up parts of myself." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He took the towel from her hands and set it down. Then he looked at her, not with answers, but with understanding. "Then don't give anything up," he said. "Let it be additive, not subtractive." She blinked. "Additive?" He stepped closer. "You don't need to lose yourself to let me care. I don't want to replace anything, I just want to stand beside it." Her throat tightened. "You don't scare easily," she said. "I do," he admitted. "You just make it easier to be brave." That night, as he left, he paused at the door. "There's something I want to show you. Not tonight, but soon." "What is it?" she asked. He smiled. "A place I've been building, for people who are rebuilding." And then he was gone, leaving behind the quiet hum of something growing. Later that week, Hannah walked into a client meeting at a downtown condo complex. She wore the cream blouse Nathan had helped her pick out, but the confidence in her step had nothing to do with fabric. The meeting went well. The client extended the contract. On the way home, she passed a boutique and saw a coat in the window. Soft camel wool, tailored, simple. She didn't need it. But for the first time in a long while, she wanted something, just for herself. She stepped inside, and as she tried it on, the saleswoman smiled. "You look like you've got something worth walking into." Hannah smiled back. Maybe she did. That night, as she tucked Grace and Emma into bed, Emma whispered, "Mr. Nathan makes you smile different." Hannah brushed a curl behind her daughter's ear. "Different how?" "Like, you remember you're special." Grace, already half asleep, added, "You laugh more when he's here." Hannah stood in the doorway a while after that, watching them breathe. Then she made tea, curled up in her corner chair, and finally allowed herself to exhale. Nathan wasn't trying to save her. He was offering to see her. And somewhere deep inside, she was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to be seen. But even as she sipped her tea and looked out at the city's lights blinking in the distance, a new thought quietly surfaced. Could she allow herself to want more, without fearing it would be taken away? Spring arrived quietly that year, not with fireworks or grand announcements, but with soft green leaves pushing through branches and the smell of wet earth after a long, patient thaw. Hannah noticed it one morning as she walked Grace and Emma to school, how their hands felt warmer in hers, how the sunlight lingered longer on the sidewalk, how laughter came more easily these days. Nathan had become a fixture in their lives. He showed up with takeout on stormy evenings. He fixed the kitchen drawer that had refused to close for 3 years. He helped Emma build a cardboard rocket for her science fair and let Grace use his laptop for her book report when the family's second-hand one crashed. But more than what he did, it was how he did it. With patience, with presence, with no need to be thanked, though Hannah thanked him anyway in glances and quiet smiles, and the way she slowly let her guard down, piece by piece. He never slept over. Not yet. He never crossed boundaries she hadn't clearly invited him past. But he was there, and the girls began to notice. One Sunday afternoon they all went to the park. Nathan brought a picnic blanket and 2 kites, claiming he had no idea how to fly them, only to send his soaring within minutes, much to Emma's delight and Grace's cautious awe. They sat in the grass afterward. Hannah leaned back on her hands, eyes closed to the sun. Nathan lay beside her, arms folded behind his head. The girls ran ahead, chasing bubbles from a nearby vendor. "You're good with them," she said. He turned to her. "They make it easy." "No," she said, opening her eyes, "it's not easy. You just make it look that way." He didn't say anything at first, just reached out and brushed a blade of grass from her sleeve. "I don't know what this is becoming," he said quietly, "but I know it's real." She looked at him, and something inside her softened completely. That night, back at the apartment, Hannah tucked the girls into bed. Emma fidgeted under the blankets, biting her lip. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." Emma sat up. "If Mr. Nathan stays, can we call him Dad?" The question came so gently, so earnestly, it made Hannah's heart stop. Grace turned her head slowly, eyes wide. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. "Why do you want that?" Emma shrugged. "Because he feels like one. Not like a pretend one. A real one." Grace nodded. "He listens, and he doesn't yell. And when he helps with homework, he doesn't make us feel dumb." Hannah swallowed, emotion catching in her chest. "That name, Dad, it means a lot. It's not something small." "We know," Emma whispered. She kissed their foreheads and tucked them in tight. "Let me think about it, okay?" They nodded, yawning, already drifting off. She didn't sleep that night. She lay awake replaying their words, their faces, the way they looked at him. It wasn't just affection, it was trust. And trust for them didn't come easy. The next morning, she called Nathan and asked if he could meet them at the playground after school. He arrived early. The girls were already racing across the monkey bars when Hannah pulled him aside. "They asked me something," she said softly. His brow furrowed. "Is everything okay?" "They asked if they could call you Dad." His breath hitched. "They said it's how they feel when they're with you," she added. "That it feels safe. That you make them feel smart. Loved." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken in the best way. "I told them I'd ask you." Nathan looked across the park at the girls, now sitting in the sandbox, heads bent together. Then he looked back at Hannah. "I would be honored," he said, "if it's what they want, if it's what you're okay with." Her eyes welled up. "I am." He walked over slowly and sat beside the girls. They looked up at him, expectant. He smiled, heart in his throat. "You asked your mum something last night," he said gently. "About me?" They nodded. "I just want you to know," he continued, "being a father isn't something you inherit. It's something you choose. And I choose you. Both of you. Every day. If you still want that." Emma threw her arms around him, burying her face in his sweater. Grace leaned in, more reserved, but didn't pull away when he wrapped an arm around her too. They sat like that for a while, 3 heartbeats in sync. Hannah watched from the bench, tears sliding down her cheeks. They didn't see her, but they didn't need to. This moment wasn't about her anymore. It was about them, and about something deeper than titles or timelines. It was about love choosing them. Back. That evening, Nathan stayed for dinner. Emma insisted on setting a plate that said Dad on it, scribbled in pink marker. Grace quietly adjusted it so it sat straight. Hannah served them stew and bread, heart full to the brim. Later, as she stood at the sink, Nathan stepped behind her and placed a hand gently on her back. "They feel like mine," he said, his voice rough. She turned to him, leaning into his touch. "They always needed someone who stayed," she whispered. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "I'm not thanking you," she said softly. "I'm choosing you too." And somewhere deep within, where years of pain had once settled like stone, something new began to grow. But even as the night faded into quiet, and the girls slept peacefully down the hall, one silent question rose like morning light. Could a heart that was once shattered truly believe this love might last? The letter came on a Tuesday. It was wedged beneath the apartment door, thick ivory paper with Hannah's full name typed across the front in all caps. At first, she thought it was a bill or some misplaced wedding invitation, but the moment she opened it, her stomach turned to stone. Legal notice of custody dispute, filed by Mark Collins. She didn't move, didn't blink. The walls around her seemed to stretch and close in all at once. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as her eyes skimmed the words. Petition for joint custody. Review of parental rights. Financial compensation. Assessment of current environment. The page slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. She hadn't seen Mark in 5 years. Not since the night he handed her divorce papers between contractions. Not since he left the hospital without asking if the girls had even been born. Now he wanted custody. A door creaked open behind her. Emma peeked out, hair messy from her nap. "Mommy, why are you standing like that?" Hannah quickly knelt, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking." Emma tilted her head, unconvinced. "Your eyes look mad." "I'm not mad," Hannah said softly. "Just surprised." She tucked the papers into a drawer before Emma could see the name, but her hands were still shaking. That evening she called Nathan. She didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to soften the edges. "He filed for custody," she said flatly. "After all these years." Nathan's silence on the other end was deep and still. Then, "Why now?" She laughed without humor. "Because I'm happy. Because the girls love you. Because maybe someone told him I'm with someone wealthy, and he thinks there's money to squeeze." Nathan's voice darkened. "He doesn't want them. He wants control." She nodded, though he couldn't see her. "And maybe revenge." "I'll handle it." She blinked. "Nathan, you can't just—" "I don't mean illegally," he said. "I mean we fight. Properly, legally, loudly." Her voice cracked. "I don't want them dragged into court." "They won't be, I promise." "And if he wins?" Nathan's voice turned steel. "He won't." 2 days later, they met with an attorney, someone from Nathan's network, a woman named Lila Greer, with piercing eyes and a reputation for annihilating abusive exes in court. Hannah sat across from her, spine stiff, while Nathan held her hand under the table. "He'll likely come in with a strategy," Lila said calmly. "Paint himself as a man who was shut out, maybe reformed. He'll use your financial limitations against you." "But he abandoned us," Hannah whispered. "He never sent a card, never called." "We have medical records, testimonies, affidavits, and you have character witnesses coming out of your ears," Lila replied. "This man didn't just walk away, he tried to erase them." Hannah looked at Nathan. "And he'll use you too. Say you're buying your way into their lives." "I don't care what he says about me," Nathan replied, "as long as he never gets near those girls again." The summons arrived that weekend. Mark had filed not only for custody, but for retroactive rights, visitation, and spousal compensation. He claimed he was denied access, that he'd changed, and that his daughters deserved to know their father. Hannah nearly ripped the papers in half, but she didn't. She took them to the lawyer, then she got to work. She began gathering everything: text messages, signed hospital forms, testimonies from the nurses who remembered the night he showed up drunk, emails from school where she had listed herself as the sole contact, photos of birthdays, school events, holidays, all without him. Nathan helped her compile everything. He scanned documents, contacted a private investigator who uncovered Mark's criminal record, several minor charges, one unresolved DUI. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got. But the stronger Hannah became. No longer the woman curled on the hospital bed, abandoned. Now, she was the one building the case, the one showing her daughters what it meant to stand tall, even in fear. One afternoon, while Nathan helped Emma with a puzzle and Grace painted quietly on the floor, Hannah stepped onto the fire escape to take a call. Mark. His voice slithered through the phone like oil. "Well, look who finally learned how to answer," he sneered. "What do you want?" "I want what's mine," he snapped. "You kept them from me. You left us. I came back. That counts." "No," she said, voice steady. "You don't get to disappear and return like it's a game. You're with some rich bastard now. You think you're better than me?" "I don't think about you at all," she replied. There was silence, then a low, threatening whisper. "You'll regret this." She hung up, and for a moment, her legs gave out. She sank onto the metal steps, the cold biting through her jeans. But then the door opened behind her. Nathan stepped out. No words, just presence. She leaned into him. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "but you don't have to be alone in it." They sat like that until her breathing slowed. Later that night, Grace crawled into bed beside her. "Are you sad?" Hannah brushed hair from her daughter's eyes. "A little. Is it because of the man who left?" Hannah paused. "Yes. You don't have to be scared," Grace said sleepily. We already have a dad now. Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes. From the hallway came the soft creak of a floorboard, Nathan checking the locks like he did every night now. Quietly, steadily, like someone who understood what it meant to stay. And as Hannah lay awake beside her daughter, heart pounding, mind spinning with court dates and custody threats and legal jargon, a single thought surfaced. What if this storm wasn't here to destroy her, but to prove how far she'd already come? The lake was quiet that morning, still as glass, reflecting the blush of early spring in soft hues of pink and silver. Lake Serenity, Nathan had called it. A secluded retreat an hour outside the city, nestled between pine trees and untouched earth. He brought them there for a weekend away, to breathe, to rest, to be together without court papers and headlines and echoes of the past. The cabin was small but beautiful, wood-paneled walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the smell of cedar lingering in every room. The girls had raced to claim the loft, tossing pillows onto the floor, their laughter echoing through the beams. Hannah stood on the deck, arms crossed against the cool breeze, her eyes scanning the water. She hadn't felt this kind of silence in years, and yet Nathan had felt different all day. Not anxious, not distracted, but purposeful. There was something in the way he looked at her, like he was holding a secret that weighed more than words. Later that afternoon, they walked by the lake while the girls built fairy houses in the moss. Nathan didn't say much, just held her hand, and stopped occasionally to brush leaves from her hair or kiss her temple without a word. When they reached the old wooden dock, he paused. I want to tell you something, he said. She looked at him, heart already racing. I never imagined a family for myself, he began. Not after losing mine. Not after the years I spent building walls instead of homes. And then I met you. Hannah blinked against the light, throat tightening. You didn't ask for me, he continued. You didn't need me to save you, but you let me walk beside you. You let me in. You let me love you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. I'm not offering you rescue, he said, opening it. I'm offering you rest, a place where you're not fighting alone anymore, a place to be loved completely, exactly as you are. Inside the box was a ring, simple, elegant, timeless, like her. Marry me, Hannah. She couldn't speak. Tears slipped down her cheeks as Grace and Emma, watching from a few feet away, clapped their hands and cheered, Say yes, say yes. Hannah laughed through the tears and nodded, the word catching in her throat but glowing in her eyes. Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Later that evening, while roasting marshmallows outside, Grace asked, Does this mean you're our forever dad now? Nathan looked at Hannah before answering. I already was. The next weekend, they attended a formal charity gala at the Riverside Grand Ballroom, the very place where it all began. Hannah hadn't been back since the night she spilled wine on Nathan's shirt, but this time she wasn't there to serve. She walked in on his arm, wearing a navy blue gown that shimmered like water under moonlight. Her hair swept up, eyes confident, no trace of the woman who once disappeared behind a tray of drinks and a borrowed name tag. People turned. They whispered. Not just because of Nathan Carter, tech philanthropist and billionaire, but because of her, because of who she had become. At the height of the night, the host took the stage to thank major donors. Nathan was called up, and with him, he pulled Hannah forward. He took the mic briefly, eyes scanning the crowd. Most of you know me by numbers. Funds raised, ventures started. But tonight, I want to introduce you to the real miracle in my life. He turned to Hannah. She didn't just rebuild a home. She rebuilt a heart, mine. And together we're building something far more powerful than any technology. Family. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Politicians nodded. Influential figures took note. And then from the back of the room, a movement. A man. Dark suit. Thin smile. Mark Collins. He pushed through the crowd like smoke, his presence suddenly far too close. Well, isn't this a charming scene? He said, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. Hannah froze. The room hushed. Nathan stepped between them. You're not welcome here. Mark's smile was acidic. You think you can parade her around like a trophy and everyone forgets who she really is? Hannah stepped forward before Nathan could speak. "No," she said clearly. "They don't need to forget, because I'm not ashamed of where I came from. I survived what you tried to destroy, and I built a life that doesn't include you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone turned on their phone camera. Mark scoffed. "You think the courts will side with you after a stunt like this?" A new voice cut in. Attorney Lila Greer in a sleek black dress, arms folded. "The courts have everything they need. The only person exposing himself tonight is you." Flashbulbs popped, and just like that, Mark was escorted out by security and by the weight of truth. The moment lingered. Hannah turned to Nathan. He reached for her hand, and the room, once filled with tension, erupted into applause. But even as the music resumed and the gala swirled around them, one thought pulsed in Hannah's mind. She hadn't just claimed her voice, she had claimed her place. And yet, one final truth still waited to be spoken aloud, in a way that no courtroom or ballroom had heard yet. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in energy. Polished wood, neutral walls, the quiet shuffle of papers and hushed murmurs from observers seated in the back rows. Hannah sat beside Lila at the plaintiff's table, her palms resting flat against her knees, every muscle in her body holding the weight of 5 years. Across from her sat Mark, dressed in a tailored suit, clean-shaven, and visibly coached by the attorney he could barely afford. He looked calm, composed, but Hannah could see it, the twitch in his jaw, the restless flick of his fingers. He didn't come for the girls. He came for control, for ego, for spectacle. But this wasn't the same courtroom he might have once ruled by intimidation. And Hannah was no longer the broken woman he'd left behind. Nathan sat behind her, not at the table, but close, his quiet presence a force of gravity. Grace and Emma weren't in the room. They were with a trusted sitter nearby, reading picture books and eating sandwiches with extra crusts, safe and unaware. The judge, a woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes, called the case to order. "Petitioner, proceed." Mark's lawyer began with a scripted monologue about reconnection, a father's right, and the desire to be a part of his daughter's lives. He painted Mark as a man who had been excluded, wronged, and denied his parental bond. Hannah didn't flinch, because she was ready. Lila stood. Her voice, steady and precise, sliced through the courtroom like a scalpel. She outlined a timeline of abandonment, supported by evidence, hospital reports, eyewitness statements, financial records, and the complete absence of communication for half a decade. Then came the recorded call. Mark's voice, venomous, playing on the court speaker. "You'll regret this." There was no mistaking the intent. The judge's gaze narrowed, and then came the testimonies, the school counselor, the pediatrician, the neighbor who'd seen Hannah juggling 2 toddlers while running late to work. Every person spoke of a mother who had never wavered, never faltered, never disappeared. And then, finally, Hannah herself. She stood, no script, no papers, just her truth. "I'm not here to punish him," she said, her voice clear but soft. "I'm here because I won't let him rewrite the story of who's been here all along." She looked at the judge. "My daughters are not pawns. They're not leverage. They are whole, beautiful, loved human beings, and I won't allow a man who chose absence to now choose appearance." There was silence. Real silence. And then the judge spoke. Her ruling was swift. Custody denied. Visitation denied. All parental rights terminated on grounds of abandonment, emotional endangerment, and attempted coercion. Mark didn't shout. He didn't even speak. He stood and left. And just like that, the ghost was gone. Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through a stubborn sky. Hannah stepped onto the steps and turned to Nathan, who was already there waiting. "It's over," she whispered. "No," he said, smiling. "It's just beginning." That evening, they returned to the ballroom for a follow-up gala, this time as honored guests. The very place where her hands had once trembled over a spilled glass of wine now welcomed her with warmth, music, and light. She wore white, not as a bride, but as a woman who had been reborn. Grace and Emma walked beside her, holding flowers, their dresses twirling as they moved, and when the music shifted and the spotlight fell on her and Nathan, he took her hand. They walked onto the dance floor together, No fear, no shame, only presence. They danced slowly, the way people do when there's nothing left to prove, just everything to feel. Around them, cameras flashed, applause rang, guests whispered. But Hannah only saw the eyes of the man who had loved her in silence first, then with intention, then with everything. She rested her head against his chest and exhaled fully, for the first time in years. Later that night, after the music faded and the lights dimmed, Nathan carried the girls up to the hotel suite, one in each arm, their heads resting against his shoulders. Hannah followed, watching the way they leaned into him, the way he carried them like he always had, as his, not by blood, but by choice. And in the quiet that followed, the hotel room wrapped in silence, the city glowing beyond the window, Hannah stood by the glass and whispered something she hadn't allowed herself to say aloud until now. I'm free. Not because Mark had been defeated, but because she had reclaimed every part of herself he tried to erase. Dignity, worth, voice, love. She turned to find Nathan watching her, and in his eyes she saw not a future she was waiting for, but the life she had already begun. But even as she walked across the room, into his arms, one final truth glowed quietly in the corners of her soul. Sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply becoming the woman they swore you never would. She didn't win with screams, not with revenge. She won in the silence of someone who was called weak, and built a family stronger than any sentence. She won when she danced with her daughters in the center of the ballroom where she was once humiliated. She won when she looked in the mirror and saw love where there was once pain. Because in the end, true justice wasn't about taking him out of their lives. It was about becoming everything he swore she would never be. And maybe deep down, this story speaks to us all. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and comment below. Where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive. Perguntar ao ChatGPT.